Evening, everyone. You can be seated. I'd like to welcome everyone to another exciting Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification training class. And we are in Unit 5 here, the last of the intermediate series, but not the last of the units, just the last of the intermediate series. And we've worked and we've built up to this unit here, this unit that a lot of people sometimes tend to skip over, being the responsibility unit. People sometimes say, I'll get to that one a little bit later. And, well, they kind of miss out on that. So anyway, but you won't miss out on it because we're going to go into a deep dive in this as we continue to move forward in Chapter 1 here of the responsibility unit, unit number 5. Now, if you have your books, and like we always like to remind everybody, of course, you can go on to the Facebook page and you can click the drop-down menu and pull up the responsibility unit, download it, and you can follow us right along as we speak. You can print up the pages if you want to, and you can make some notes in there. It will make it really nice to be able to circle back and cross-reference some of the previous things that we've covered in the other units, and the cross-references that we'll be bringing up in this unit as well as we move forward. So we're going to be picking up where William left off. He finished up on page 1 there under being responsible is important, and he was covering the note to the student and going into kind of a deep detail of what we see taking place in society and what their solution is. That is, the solutions coming from the experts that are guiding our young men and women who are tomorrow's leaders. They're going to be tomorrow's decision makers into activities. Now they're giving them, if you were paying attention to the class, coming from some of the prestigious universities, they're giving them, if you remember what we talked about in getting the facts, right? There are true facts and there are false facts, right? But anything can be cleaned up, waxed, and polished to look like a great fact. But this is where it comes back to us to further research or to search again until we get to the core of the matter, okay? And a lot of the information that's coming out from some of these institutions, it's not very accurate, and it's leading a lot of people to make irresponsible choices that continues that downward spiral that we see in society that's ever growing, because once a person makes an immoral choice and they don't have the education to see what led to that choice and what they need to do to fix that choice, it's like they keep on making poor choice after poor choice after poor choice, and that those poor choices, they're kind of like a weight that's added to a person who's in the middle of the ocean and they're trying to survive and they're struggling. I don't know if you've ever had the wonderful blessing of being trained how to swim and learning how to tread water, and you're out there in the middle of the pool and the instructor has got his little stopwatch there and he's telling you how to tread water, and you've got to sit out there and you've got to kick your legs and move your arms to stay afloat, to keep afloat, and you're getting tired. But the reality is in a situation where there is no lifeguard, you have to keep your head above water. Well, society is trying to keep their head above water, but they've got all these weights of false facts, immorality, poor influences, constantly bombarding them, pulling down at their feet, and sadly, society is drowning right now. Look at the things that are taking place over in the Middle East, things that are taking place in Africa, things that are taking place in Russia, the stuff that's taking place between China and Taiwan, and even here in our own backyard, the great U.S. of A., we have a lot of war taking place. Now, it might not be a matter of tanks and bombs and missiles and so forth, but a war, wars are taking place in families. They're taking place in communities. They're taking place amongst our political leaders on Capitol Hill on a daily basis. And so the goal is really not to to focus on those negative aspects of society because we know they're there, but we need to make our students aware of the fact of what they're going to be dealing with in today's society, but making the focus on how they can develop a positive character, what they need to do to make positive choices, how they can recognize the bombardment of negative influences that are constantly coming at them on a daily basis from every source of media, every sense that a person has. They're being bombarded with these things. We want to get them to the point so they can recognize, and hopefully, like I've mentioned in times past, get them to the point where they value themselves and value themselves enough to learn what is being taught. I really grasp hold of the information that is being taught in the peaceful solution enough so that when they're faced with having to make a moral decision because they value themselves and because they value what they've been taught and they value their future and reputation, and we can go on and on and on, they're going to stop and think about the best course of action. They're going to go back to what they've learned in the classes that you've taught them, right? In the little one-on-ones that you had, or in answering questions in the class during an activity time or scenario. And they're going to go back to that, and they're going to remember that, and they're going to make a right choice. And that's the goal of getting our students, as the goal of the the peaceful solution is to change the hearts and the minds. Well, change them to what, right? Change them towards a positive character, which is completely opposite of what we see in society today. We see mostly a mixture. It's not all negative character, but it's a combination of a mixture of positive and negative characteristics, with seeming like the negative winning over. But we're going to turn that around. The journey of a mile starts with the 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So William was talking about, if you look at that last paragraph there, he says, it says, did you know that young adults have the fastest growing rate of STDs in our nation? And that is still accurate to this day. I think it's ages 15 through 21 or 24, somewhere around in there. That's the fastest growing rates of STDs. Even now, a lot of the research from the schools of oncology and so forth, we've done a couple of reports on that, have shown that more younger people are actually coming down with cancers now, where it wasn't very common to see these things in younger people. The population or the demographics of younger people in these age ranges, I think they usually figure between age 15 through age 24 as young people. Once you hit 25-year-old, right? I'm just joking. But it says here, and that teen pregnancies have reached approximately 1 million a year. Now, that doesn't mean that they're brought to term, because another large statistic, at last I checked, I'm probably sure it's more than that now, it was 46 million abortions a year that were taking place as well. The bottom line is, if you make irresponsible choices, excuse me, if you make irresponsible choices, you are just as likely to have to face the consequences as anyone else. So it is important that you develop a responsible attitude about your choices. And this is always been the focus, to have the student focus on themselves. And that's one of the things I was thinking about that before coming up to class, and taking it into consideration, because it's really easy to point out other people's faults, and I think it can be easy for any of us to see the faults of another, especially when we're in a bad situation or we've done something bad, and well, at least I didn't do what he did, it's not as bad as what that person did. It could be easier to make out or point out something someone else did, instead of taking accountability for what we've done and focusing on what we did and what we need to do to improve it. But I was thinking about it in regards to everything we're learning about the peaceful solution. And it takes a lot of effort, you know, to remember the concepts and the lessons that we've learned over the years. And all we've really gone through here is the intermediate series. You know, of course, we covered the elementary, the beginners, and we're going to be getting into the advanced and parenting and workplace and so forth. But it's a lot to remember. Like William said, you know, it's not necessary that we have to memorize everything. I mean, would it be great if we could? Sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome, right? But what's most important is that we put it to use in our everyday lives. But when you're so focused on remembering all these facts and all this information on developing a positive character, when you value striving to improve yourself so that you can be a benefit to society, you don't really have time to focus on what someone else is doing. You know, you're focused on building your character, building your, you know, training your thoughts, refining your behaviors to be something that people can look to and rely on, right? They can rely on you as a person of integrity. And so when we have our focus on that, we're not pointing the finger at someone else. We're, like they say, you know, when you're pointing one finger at someone else, you're pointing three back at yourself, which means we need to look at ourselves more than we look at other people. So the bottom line is, if you make irresponsible choices, you are just as likely to have to face the consequences as anyone else. So it is important that you develop a responsible attitude about your choices, obligations, and personal well-being. Then, and here's this word consistently again that William covered and went over, consistently practice making choices that are healthy and beneficial to yourself and others, which goes right in line with a right choice, with a moral choice, right? A moral choice does not bring harm to yourself, others, and the environment. So if they don't bring harm, the opposite of harm is health. They bring health. They bring benefit to you, others, and the environment. And there's many ways that can be done. So let's look over to page 2 here. We'll finish this part out here with the note to the student. So what you will learn, and this is to the student, in this unit, you will learn to build and develop your character to become a morally responsible person. Now, this development part, you know, so you build a character, right? You've got to put the knowledge in there, and you have to know when and how to use it. And the development part comes through the experiences. You know, when you're going through things, when your resolve is tested as to whether you're going to practice the peaceful solution or not. How are you going to deal with this situation where disrespect is being shown? You know, how are you going to practice self-control here? Or how are you going to deal with the feelings of rejection, right? All these things that we learn. So that's where the development part comes in, because now you've got to take all these things that you've learned over the years and put them into practice. And as a result, what you build on will be developed into a perfect character. Now, that's not an overnight thing. And yes, you can actually, tell your students, yes, you can actually develop a perfect character. Well, how do we know that? Because the information that is given to us here in the peaceful solution is perfect, right? Like William covered last class, there's no need to change it. There's no need to add to it. There's no need to take away from it. The old saying, the reinventing the wheel, right? Why would we reinvent something that's already perfect? I've seen some people come out with ideas for bikes, and they've got these square wheels on the bikes, and they got them kind of off center so it'll give you a smooth ride. I'm like, that just seems so much work. Why not just keep it the way it is? Circles been working for thousands of years with no problems. Look at out in the universe. Look at our cells. I mean, everything it's circular. It seems to work just fine as it is. But anyway, sometimes people come up with wacky ideas. So you will also learn more about what it means to fulfill your obligations. All right, manage time, which is a big one, especially in today's society. People People are always in a hurry for nothing. A lot of times they're in a hurry because they're irresponsible with their time. They wait to the very last minute, and people actually, they'll put more time in calculating how to waste time than they will in planning to get to someplace on time, right? Okay, let's see, I got to get to work. Got to get to work at 8 o'clock. It's going to take me 20 minutes. If I go to bed, let's see, I can wake up. I got to leave at 7. So if I sleep in my clothes tonight, I can wake up at 7:50, have my coffee maker on, grab it, head out, and be on the road by 7:55. Hopefully, I'll make it to work by 8. But it's a 20-minute commute. They have unrealistic expectations, and procrastination is a big thing too. But managing time, that's a skill. And companies pay big money, to bring presenters in to talk about time management within the company, because a lot of time is wasted within a company that costs sometimes thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of dollars when you're think about dealing with a company that has 10 or 20,000 employees, and 10% of those employees are 20 or 30 minutes late every day. How much productivity is lost? You see, that's irresponsibility. So they're going to learn more about managing time and treat yourself and others in a responsible way. In addition to this, you will explore the benefits of responsibility to society and how you can be responsible for your safety in times of disaster. So, pay close attention as the lessons are taught, participate in all the activities and class discussion, practice being responsible as you learn more about developing this important character trait, because the lessons you learn today will determine the adult you become tomorrow. All right. I want to go back to procedure number 1 really quick in the character unit. If you don't have it, that's okay. I'll read it to you. Procedure number 1 in the character unit in chapter 1, LP1E. Remember, we're talking about becoming the responsible adult tomorrow, and it kind of reminds me of this, because this is always stuck out to me. I remember reading this, I don't know, years ago. It's been a long time, but it kind of set the pace, the course for the lessons that were to follow from character all the way to the end here. And in procedure 1 of the character unit, LP1E, it says, inform students that they will begin studying from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. This program will encourage the development of positive moral character. Explain to students that during the course of this program, they will also learn that developing a positive moral character is the first step. Okay, so we have all 5 of these laid out here, but developing a positive moral character is the first step towards accepting themselves and others. Controlling their behavior, so we have self-control there. Respecting society and the environment, which is the respect unit, and making responsible choices. Now, you can't jump to making responsible choices without understanding why they need to develop a positive moral character. And this is why this has to be laid out in the order that it's given, because it builds from one lesson to another. But just keep that in mind there, because everything that we're covering and everything that we have covered is bringing our students to a point where they can become a responsible adult, an adult who can make responsible choices, because it's the choices that are made that determine the direction, the success, or the failure of the society that we're in. Our society is run by people, right? It's run by people who make decisions or choices on a daily basis. Sometimes those choices are bad. Sometimes seems like they kind of pan out, right? But, when it comes to moral choices, these things are not really being taught on an everyday basis. It's not coming from the school systems. It's not coming from the courts, right? It's not coming from the legislative departments in the local governments or the federal governments. So it's up to us to instill these concepts in the hearts and the minds of our students, but it first starts with us. So let me look back here. All right, we're still in procedure 2 here of lesson 1. I'm just going to read that again there. Lesson plan 1, page E, under procedure 2, it says, tell students that in today's lesson, I guess we're getting into procedure 2, they will focus on what it means to be responsible, how to develop a responsible character, and the rewards of achieving a responsible character. Have students turn to page 3 in their handbooks and read the introduction. And this is the point where you will call on volunteers and, get them to read and interact. And these are the things that at this point, your students should be pretty comfortable. Hopefully, I don't know if you had the same class or whatnot. I don't know how it will be worked out. But, they should be comfortable with you as a teacher and comfortable with participating. But, always encourage them to participate. Like William said, don't force them, but encourage them to participate and work with them and help them along as they do participate in the lessons that we're covering here. On page 3 here at the very top, it says, anything worth doing is worth doing until you get it right. Anything worth doing is worth doing until you get it right. Now, this is and this, I'm telling you, this lesson on responsibility, and I know we've been covering these things for several years now, but it's like this is something that is, all of it is, but this is something that is desperately needed in society right now, right? Because people don't want to put forth effort. They want it ready-made. They want it instant. They want an app to do it for them. Well, the app comes from their application of what they're learning so that they can achieve the results. But again, society has made it to where there are so many distractions in the lives of people, in the lives of people, that they don't really have the desire to even lift the finger to work anymore. It was funny. I was listening to something some years ago, and it was I don't know, like a scenario where robots had taken over society, not because they had rose up and rebelled or anything like that, but because mankind had designed them to basically do all the work for mankind, so they can just sit back and relax. Everything from cooking to feeding. Even to procreating, the robots, they took care of all those things for mankind, and mankind was just a hunk of flesh on the earth. Sadly, it probably would get to that, if certain people had their ways. But, one thing I've always admired about the older generations, like the generations from the author Israel Hawkins from the 30s and the 20s and the early 1900s and so forth. They always had a mindset, even in their older age, to work. They would stay busy. They would keep their hands and their minds active at something, because they said, if I stop working, I start dying. If I stop moving, my body starts dying. It starts getting decrepit and so forth. It's kind of like a house that doesn't get used, and then it starts dry rotting, and the bugs start invading and the rodents start coming in and so forth. But as long as you've got someone there doing something, that house kind of stays fresh. But anything worth doing is worth doing until you get it right. Now remember that, and think about what we covered with consistency, or being consistent. I'm going to go back to the character unit in chapter 4 real quick. Character unit in chapter 4, under the note to the teacher. Let's see here, that's 4. Anything worth doing is worth doing until you get it right. Oop. I missed something here. Oh, here it is. It says, in this chapter, students will learn that their character is one of the most important possessions, and just like any other possession, it must be maintained through self-control, consistency, and discipline. Now, what we're encouraging our students to do here, and this is the goal, is of course to develop a positive character. So it's worth doing until you get it right. In other words, they have to be consistent, and this is what we covered in the previous chapters, and how to maintain these traits. We develop them. What is it? How does it apply to us? How does it apply to other people? How do we maintain it? How do we deal with it in society and so forth? But they have to be consistent with it. The minute they throw their hands up and say, you know what, I quit, like what the previous teacher said, that's when they fail. They're going to make mistakes, and they're probably going to make bad choices on this road of developing a positive moral character. But the key is for them to get back up, dust themselves off, and continue forward. Someone once said, you're going to fall in life. So if you do fall, at least fall forward. And that way you're still heading in the right direction, but you gotta dust yourself off. You gotta get up, acknowledge that you made a bad choice, see what you need to do to fix it, and then just move forward, right? And that's how we have to encourage our students, because they are gonna run into those pitfalls occasionally. This chapter will prepare students for situations that could test their resolve to make positive decisions. Remember that word resolve means decide firmly on a course of action, to settle or find a solution. And so the goal is to always find a peaceful solution, that is one that follows the rules. So this one says, the title of this chapter here is You Can Count on Me. You can count on me. Now I was looking back at because this is kind of it's the title to the chapter, but it's also like an idiom. That was the word I was looking for the other day when I was teaching. I couldn't remember what it meant when they gave different phrases, but it's like an idiom. It's just a saying, right? Idiom is idioma. It's I think in Latin or Spanish it means language or speech. But this phrase, you can count on me. Now, there's several things that you can find on it, and some of it is not really backed up. I think it's people's speculations. But it basically is a casual way of saying that you want to be a part of an activity or an event. Hey, we're going to be going to a conference on character development down in Texas. Would you like to go? You can count on me, right? It's often used when someone proposes an idea and you want to show your interest or willingness to participate. The phrase implies that you're excited to join and participate in the action. Well, in this action that we're learning here is the action of practicing this positive character trait of responsibility. In fact, let me see here if I have it. I don't think I do. I didn't print it at least. All right. Hopefully I'll bring it next time. So it says here under the introduction, have you ever stopped to consider why people are so different? Why are some people honest while others are dishonest? Why are some kind while others are kind? The differences in how we behave and how we treat others are based on our character. And when I was thinking about this back, not anything new, but when I see these words, these things stand out because of everything we've learned and everything we consistently cover. And in every book, we're going back over the same thing in different ways. But when you think about the differences in how we behave, it made me think of how our behavior is. It's like integrity, right? Everybody remembers what William covered last time on that definition of integrity. I believe it's page 18 of the character unit. The internalization of positive character traits as seen through your attitude and your actions, something like that, right? Pretty close. But we internalize these things. We have to internalize them first. Now, somebody can, put out a front, right? They could put out a false face of a person of integrity, but over time, their true character is going to rise to the surface. Okay, because they're going to think that they're in a situation where nobody can see them. You notice when someone's getting ready to do something that's immoral, there's always this act. What are they doing? I want to make sure nobody's seeing what I'm getting ready to do that's wrong. And what does that tell you? They know it's wrong. They know it's wrong. At that moment, their resolve is being tested to see if they're going to make the right choice. And remember what we covered in the self-control unit. The true test of self-control is what you're doing when nobody's looking. Okay? So when you're in a situation where you're by yourself, your character should be steadfast all the way through, just as if you had 100 pairs of eyes watching you do a particular thing, right? And that's a part of being consistent. That's how you develop this trait of integrity. But behavior is the end result of the internalized, the values. Remember we covered in chapter 1 of the character unit, the factors that make up your character. One of those things are values, family values, personal values, and so forth. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about how and we covered it in the peaceful solution as well, but how our attitude is the way we think and feel about something. Well, that's an influence, but our attitude about something or someone will alter our perception of that situation or that person. If we have a bad attitude, when we see that person or we're in this situation, we're always going to be thinking negatively about that person or about that situation. But if we have a positive attitude, right, we're going to be looking for the great. We're going to be looking for how we can be helpful to them. And sometimes it might seem like we really got to struggle to find something positive about somebody. But a person of moral integrity will always look for the positive, right? They're going to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. Remember what I said at the beginning of the class, it's easy to point out other people's faults, but that's not the goal of the peaceful solution, is to point out what other people are doing wrong, right? We do acknowledge certain things. Why? Because we need to know what we tripped on. I think everybody in here has been walking down the road, tripped, and you look back to see what you tripped on. Right? You at least want to know what caused that great embarrassment. If you're by yourself, it's not too bad. It might be one of these. Did anybody see me? Did anybody just see me trip? I've done it a couple times and actually fell and went into a push-up immediately, just to kind of play it off, but sometimes it's pretty bad. You can't recover from some things, and you just got to chuckle at yourself. But we have to be aware of ourselves, and we have to be aware of the things that are influences that might cause us to make bad choices, right? And then examine that with what we've learned through the peaceful solution and see what we need to do to fix it so that we don't fall down in that same pit or trip over that same stumbling block again. But character here, notice here, is the sum of the traits, or sum of traits, the sum, S-U-M, of traits that enable you to choose between right and wrong behavior. And you remember what we covered in the character unit regarding the dividing line that distinguishes between right and wrong. And that was classified as morality or morals or rules, right? Well, what helps us or enables us to choose, right? The rule is the line. It says, this is right, this is wrong. 50 miles an hour is the speed limit. No right on red is the traffic rule. Your character is going to determine if you go 50 miles an hour. It's going to determine if you make a right on red, because what? I don't see no police. Ooh. Or you're out in Dallas, they got those red light cameras. I don't know if they have them anymore. I heard that they were abandoning them or whatever, But your character is going to be what determines whether you follow that rule or not, okay? Because the rules are there. And the rules, remember, the rules are there to keep us safe. And that's one of the things we teach in the early learning and the beginner series, why rules are important. Let me jump real quick because I have a note here for my character unit, chapter 1, page 4 and 5 here. And I think I was just looking at this and showing here how, the sum of traits. This word traits real quick. I'm going back there. A trait is a particular characteristic. Now it goes back to that word characteristic there. A trait is a particular characteristic, quality, or tendency that someone or something has. A particular characteristic that can produce a particular type of behavior. So in other words, it becomes your characteristic feature, right? You know this person, like they say, another old saying is you know a tree by its fruits. They even use the statement, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, referring to a child and their parents. What are they referring to? They're referring to the behaviors or the activities of that child in reference to the behaviors and the activities of the parents. So we can see these traits. This is something that we can actually see. And this is as we work to develop these positive character traits. Remember how we measure the success of the peaceful solution is through behavioral changes. So it's something that the observer, of course their eyes are trained to know what to look for, can actually see and determine that this person has a positive character. Just to refresh your memory, on page 4 of the character unit, under character, everyone has it, but where does it come from? In the first paragraph there, and about middle ways down, it says, in fact, our character is an integral part of who we are. Whether the character we have is positive or negative depends upon many factors. These factors include genetics, family values, influences, experiences, choices, and environment. Together, they help to mold and shape our character. The sum of these traits here. On page 5 here, we see, in regards to genetics, this was a Jean-Baptiste de Monet Lamarck, a French naturalist in the study of genetics, proposed that characteristics acquired during an individual's lifetime are passed on to their offspring. And the question is, what characteristics are you acquiring now, and how will they affect your children? When you think about that, you think about, building a positive character, but not just for you, but also for your offspring, your children. What are you going to cause them to inherit? Not, a house or money or something, but they're going to inherit the traits that you've developed over many years. Okay. And so hopefully we're giving them a fighting chance, so to speak, to be able to function in society in the way where they're not going to always be somebody's enemy because they're engaging in immoral acts on a consistent basis. On page 14 here, under the positive side of character, it says, your character is made up of many different qualities. They are called character traits. Character traits can be either positive or negative based upon your values and what you have been taught, your choices, and your experiences. And this is what we see here, the differences in how we behave. Well, to answer that question at the very beginning there, why are so many people different? Why are people so different? Why is there such a stark contrast in our society of people who are honest and dishonest, patient and impatient, kind and hateful? Well, these characteristics are based upon values and what people have been taught. Everybody's been taught something, whether they realize it or not. Even if they were in a home where the parent wasn't really active in their lives, maybe they were, abused drugs or just not really trained to have great parenting skills, they were still teaching that child, right? They were still teaching that child, albeit negative characteristics, but they were teaching that child, and that's what that child, learned. Some of those things they probably valued, some of those things they probably didn't value, and that's what they took with them in life. The key to having moral character is to develop positive character traits. When you demonstrate these on a consistent basis, you will be known as a person of integrity. People who have moral character show by their actions and attitude that they care about themselves and others. And this is how you know, because when a person consistently demonstrates positive character, you know that they don't only care about us, but they care about themselves too. And they understand that how they interact with others is also going to come back and reflect on them, right? Affect them in some way, shape, or form, kind of like that ripple that goes out, and they come back. A person's character is made up of both positive and negative traits. For example, having respect for others is a positive trait, but disrespect is a negative one. Having self-control is a positive trait, but a lack of self-control is a negative one. You can develop positive character when you focus on developing positive character traits while eliminating the negative ones. Focus. And that's one of the things that, I like to focus on myself in regards to, I kind of always like to go back and just put it in my mind, what we're learning here and what you find at the front of every page, at the front on the cover, I guess I should say, of every one of these books, to change the hearts and minds, to change the hearts and minds. Well, as teachers, we want to get our students to focus on the things that will build their character. Why? Because as I said at the very beginning of this, society is filled with negative influences that are consistently bombarding everyone, our students, us, everyone, okay? We want to train them to redirect their focus on the things that are going to help them to become successful in life, okay? You can't stop everything bombarding you continuously. It's not possible. But we can choose what we focus on and what we let go. In the character unit on page 21, we see here, don't accentuate the negative. Keep in mind that nobody's character is completely negative and devoid of all positive character traits. Yet, most people do have some negative traits that they need to eliminate from their character. For example, someone can be a compassionate person, always looking for ways to help others, but is usually late for most functions and events. Well, they need to come to this class here because we're talking about responsibility. Or he can be an honest person, but very impatient. Do these examples remind you of anyone? Do they remind you of yourself? Not accentuating negative character traits means first realizing that there are some aspects of our character that need changing. Then, notice here, focusing on doing just the opposite. And that's the main thing I'm wanting to draw our attention to is focusing. This word focus here. Focus on developing these positive character traits. But focusing on doing just the opposite of the behavior you want to change. For example, if you have difficulty being on time, you might try going to bed earlier, setting your alarm clock a half an hour earlier. Don't hit the snooze 3 times. It doesn't say that in there, but people who like to sleep, they will hit the snooze 3 times or 4 times or however long their snooze is set for. Setting your alarm clock a half an hour earlier than you normally wake up. You might even borrow a few books from the library on time management, which we're also going to be covering in this unit. The point is to focus on improving your character by eliminating the negative and accentuating the positive. So the focus is never on the negative, right? And this is what I was saying at the very beginning. We don't want to bombard or point out, people's faults, because people are going to make irresponsible choices, just like we've made irresponsible choices. And we've been in the opposite, side of those things where someone was pointing something out to us because of our irresponsibility. But it's like after a while, it's like, all right, okay, you said that like 4 times now, can we move on to something You got to make your point and then point the person in the right direction as teachers, right? Point the person in the right direction and then give them the space and the opportunity to prove themselves. And then you see at the bottom there, accentuate means to emphasize. It means to emphasize. On oh boy, I didn't believe it. Did I bring that one? I sure didn't. But you can write down for your notes. Well, I'll read this one. In the acceptance unit on page 8, we see here at the very top, it says, keep in mind that just because something is not within your control at this point, your life doesn't mean it will always, at this point in your life, doesn't mean it will always be that way. Focus on the things you can control, like your attitude, and grades, instead of worrying about the things you have no control over. Developing the moral character trait of patience and thankfulness can really help you at this stage of your life. Keep in mind that you will not be a teenager forever. Focus on educating yourself in moral development to achieve your highest potential. And that's what I wanted to get out of there. Focus on educating yourself in moral development to achieve your highest potential. And everybody has potential. Just like we talked about, everyone has value, right? And it takes a trained and educated person to see the value, to see the potential in another human being. A lot of society has just given up on people. You know what? Just lock them up and throw away the key. They'll never become anything. They'll never improve. They'll never get better. Well, no, they won't if they're not given the tools. You see, I look at us as teachers, kind of like an artist looks at clay. I don't know if anybody has ever worked with clay before. That is molding and shaping clay. I've seen some people that have just some phenomenal skills, but they'll just take this hunk, this blob of clay. And to me, it just looks like a blob of clay. I don't have any artistic ability. I could probably make like a stick, out of it. That's about as artistic as it gets with me. But they can, formulate these beautiful works of art, with great detail and precision that is coming from their mind and being, sent through their hand, and they're working this clay and carving it out and everything, but they can look at that clay and they can see the end result of it. As teachers of the Peaceful Solution, we kind of have to be that way towards our students, right? And that's goes back to what we're talking about here, accentuating the positive, focusing on the positive, not the negative, right? And finding a way to develop and build on the person's strengths, not weaknesses. And so we want to focus on developing our positive character traits while eliminating the negative ones. Let's see here. What time is it? Yeah. Let me get this in before we finish up, because I thought this was pretty interesting. This is on our brains and the shaping of our brains, because, in thinking about changing the hearts and the minds, some people have the mindset, and we've heard it at some of the presentations we've gone to, if you would have taught me a long time ago, it'd probably be different. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, all these different sayings, I'm kind of stuck in my ways now, or maybe you can teach my grandchildren. No, everybody can change. Everybody's brain, for the longest point of time, for the longest period of time, neuroscientists used to think that after a certain age, I think at up to about age 8, you kind of reach your peak of brain cell development and neuron development and so forth. And of course, things start dying off because neurons are like, hey, if you don't use them, you lose them, right? But that's not totally true, right? Now, some things do grow weaker and fade off after they aren't used, but they've also found recently that you can form new neural connections, and more neurons, new pathways in the brain with learning. Your brain has an infinite capacity of learning, of developing and storing information. There is no, you've maxed out your brain cloud account, now you have to add another 1995. We don't have to hook to the cloud to remember things. All we have to do is work our brain. You know, the author once said one of the best exercises of the brain is knowledge, learning and practicing what you've learned. Well, this study here shows, and it's talking about um, malleability of our brain. You know, our brains they actually physically can shape and reform, and they talk about a term called neuroplasticity, right? In other words, like our character, our brains are not stuck in one particular state unless we choose to allow it to be so. Um, it says if you aren't deliberate and conscious in shaping your brain, other people and experiences will do this for you. Now, think about that in regards to self control. If we don't practice self control, in other words, someone constantly has to tell us to do things, you know, get up on time, clean your room, do your job, don't stand around, get off your phone, stop talking to that person, stop doing this. You know, you're not practicing self control. Somebody else has to practice it for you. Okay. And it goes the same with the influences that we put in our mind. If we're not consciously shaping our brain or what goes into our mind, all these other things are going to shape it for us. Experiences, situations, and people, positive or negative, will leave lasting traces on your brain by way of strengthened neural pathways. And they go a little further here. It says, what you focus on will determine the parts of your brain that fire, wire, and strengthen. Then, as those parts of the brain switch on and the neurons start firing, lasting connections will be made, strengthening memories and influencing what the brain will attend to in the future, positive or negative. It doesn't matter. If you're focusing on negative things, that's what your brain, your mind is subject. It's just, it's objective. It doesn't care what you put in it. It's like what they classify, they compare the brain to soil. You know, if you take these sticky burrs out here that everybody loves, I know they do, right? And you plant those things in the ground, or you take, you know, a rose plant and plant that in the ground, the soil, it's just gonna nourish and bring up whatever that seed is in the ground. It doesn't care whether it's a weed or whether it's a flower. Well, it's the same thing with your brain. It doesn't care whether it's a negative thought or a positive thought. If you put that seed in there, it's going to bring forth the fruits of it. If you let your mind settle on self-criticism, self-loathing, pain, distress, stress, worry, fear, regret, guilt, these feelings and thoughts will shape your brain. You will be more vulnerable to worry, depression, anxiety, and be more likely to notice. Now, notice here what it says here, because as it shapes our brain, it changes our attitude and it changes our perspective on things. So you will be more likely to notice the negatives of a situation, frame things in a negative way, and be barreled off track by what you could have or could have done. In other words, you know, well, I could have did this, or I could have did that, shoulda, coulda, woulda, as they say, because now you're looking at things in a negative way, because you're allowing self-criticism and loathing and stress and worry and fear and all these things harp away. That is, you're putting your focus on it. On the other hand, if you focus on positive feelings, and I say thoughts because the thoughts lead to the feelings, and frame situations with a tilt towards the positive, eventually, now this is what the research shows here, your brain will take on a shape that reflects this hard wiring, actually, so you have a temporary wiring that takes place in your brain when an impression or a thought or an experience occurs, and your brain makes a temporary connection there. Now, the more you focus and feed that connection, it actually becomes hardwired in the brain. Now, this is scientific, research here, but it says hardwiring and strengthening connections around resilience, optimism, gratitude, positive emotion, and self-esteem. This will start to grow these parts of your brain and shape a brain that is able to notice the great, respond to the bad, and move forward rather than stay stuck, rather than sit there and wallow in the mire like the peaceful solution actually teaches us against, right? When something bad occurs, we recognize it as bad, right? That's one of the things that we have to be able to do is, to stop all war, we got to acknowledge that there's a problem. When you ignore the problem, there's no fixing it, because in your mind, what's there to fix? There's not a problem. Everything's perfect. We're fighting these people, and our goal is just to wipe out our enemies. Wipe out our enemies, and then we'll have peace. Well, that doesn't create peace. Hasn't created peace in 1,000 years. Ask anyone over there in Israel and Palestine or Gaza if they're considering what's taking place right now as bringing peace. Are they getting closer to peace? Haven't been since they've been warring from the beginning. No peace has been brought. Everybody's living on edge, and it's not just there. It's anywhere they go. Anywhere you go in society, people are tired of having to fight. They're tired of fighting, right? They just want to have peace. They want to be able to enjoy life, raise their family, and bring them up in a society that they actually have a future. Well, this is a part of what we're learning here in the Peaceful Solution and in these lessons, is to train our minds to focus on the things that will help us to accomplish these goals. So we have to have the education. Our students have to have the education. Then we have to have the guidance on how to use this knowledge and apply it at the proper times. Because if you don't apply it at the right time, even though it's positive and the great knowledge, right? It's like singing. You know how to sing. You've got a beautiful voice. You're in a choir. But if you don't hit your note at the right time, everybody is, and then you're like, you go, well, that was beautiful, but the timing was just way off, right? And so this is what we're learning in the Peaceful Solution. We've got all this knowledge, and remember, we're building and developing, and the developing comes through the experience and knowing how to apply this knowledge in order to produce the end result of what we covered here at the very first part of this lesson here in the lesson plan 1 of the character unit, procedure 1, being able to make responsible choices. But we can't ignore everything that we've learned from the very beginning, from character, acceptance, self-control, respect, and now here we are in responsibility. Let me finish out this paragraph here. So it says here, in this unit, you will learn how to develop the positive character trait of responsibility. And we'll go back over this again when we get into the next class. Believe it or not, people are not born knowing how to be responsible. Responsibility, like respect and self-control, must be developed over time. Being responsible means you are someone others can count on to fulfill your duties and obligations. It was interesting because one of the things they said kind of in the medieval times, it was one of the, I think it was the Latin word or the Italian word or something for bench or something. It went back to bankers used to have a bench that they would count their coins on in order to get an accurate number. And so that word that described that bench or whatever, it kind of goes back to the word bank or banker or something like that. And they use that phrase as something to count on, that bench being something to count on to get an accurate result. Well, they use that idiom to describe a person. You can count on me, right? You can depend on me to get accurate results or to get whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. It says, being responsible means you are someone others can count on to fulfill your duties and obligations. But most of all, you can count on yourself. And that's very important. You can't take, in all we're learning here, and even as teachers learning to teach others, we can't take ourselves out of the equation, right? And like William said, it's not being confident is not the same as being conceited. We should be confident in ourselves to know that we can handle a situation and make a right choice because we're confident in our ability to recall and practice the knowledge we've learned from the Peaceful Solution. There's nothing arrogant about that. But most of all, you can count on yourself to make choices that are positive and supportive of your moral character and development. And so we're going to pick up with that. We'll get a little more detail in that second paragraph as we move forward in page 3 next class. And our next class is going to be the 15th, this upcoming Wednesday. Again, it'll be at 5:30 Central Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you there. And we do thank you for joining us for this class. Everyone, have a wonderful evening.